and Tara. And we're really excited to be here. Thanks for tracking and finding us out in the boondocks, this building. I think that we may have some struggling people in, but we'll get started. And it's with such a small group, do you guys, if you wouldn't mind just saying your name and what you represent, we'll kind of get a feel for who's here. So would you like to start?
Sure. My name is Cecile, and I got involved in the conference as an organizer because I wanted Chris Williams, who's an ecology activist in New York, who was coming to San Diego as part of this book tour anyway, to be able to speak at the conference to reach a wider audience. So he'll be speaking tomorrow at 1 o'clock at the Price Center.
Cool.
And it's like, well, I'm here, I might as well attend the workshop. So I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Great.
I'm Alex. I'm just here to learn, but I design sustainable homes.
Oh, cool. Very cool.
I'm Janet, and I heard about this through Alex, so I thought it seemed really interesting. I just wanted to see what it's all about.
Okay.
I'm Miriam, and I heard about this through our school organization. We focus on doing community service and volunteering rounds.
I'm Ashley, and same thing.
I'm Lindy, and I heard about this through Slow Food Urban San Diego.
I'm Lynn, and I actually work at the WIC program at the City Heights Wellness Center, so, and I'm MCAT, so.
I'm Kimberly Coelho, and I teach culinary at the high school level, and I also built 2 school gardens. And I was with Food on Lawn for the first 2 years we organized. And that's it.
Wonderful.
Hi, welcome. Perfect timing.
Yeah.
We're just doing, since it's a small group, we're doing short introductions. So
okay. Cool.
if you'd each like to just say who you are and what you work on, which organization you represent.
Okay. Let us know when. Oh, now?
Yeah. You came in at exact right timing. Yeah.
Well.
My name is Bridget. I live in Solana Beach, and I work for a renewable energy consulting firm, and so I'm here just to kind of follow all this stuff, so I wanted to just be here.
I'm Keith Davis, and in particular, I have a business, a food company, in which we make food from sweet potatoes. And so I'm here to hear what you guys have to say.
Great.
About the schools and stuff.
Would you like to introduce yourself as well?
Hi, I'm Alexandria Bennett. I work at Quentin and Mountain University.
All right, so we can get started. We have 2 parts, so we're actually going to switch the order. I'm going to talk a little bit about my research and some of the advocacy work that I'm involved with, and then we'll have Kat's film and a short discussion. And so the topic, as you saw for our combined presentation, has to do with Los Angeles, but I think a lot of the same themes and work apply here. So it'd be really nice to share what we do, and then also hear some of the things that you're involved with that might inspire our future efforts and kind of just spark ideas off of each other during the discussion. So I wear a number of different hats. I work as a researcher at the University of Southern California, so I'll be presenting some of that research. But also I'm working with the Jamie Oliver Foundation as the acting field coordinator for Los Angeles for the kind of not the show, but the advocacy campaign that's surrounding the show. And I also am the social action chairperson for Slow Food Los Angeles. So I'll be sharing kind of how I've been able to try and merge those different projects to go kind of toward the same goal. I see the projects as being very complementary. So I think Kat's going to help me advance slides here. So the first thing I'd like to share is some of my research from USC, and this is research that Kat's been involved with. Prior to living in San Diego, she was at USC working as well. And what we've been looking at in our research is chronic disease risk in overweight children, and then specific dietary strategies that we can promote to try and reverse some of that risk. And I'd like to explore how we can take those findings into the community and hopefully enact some change at on a larger scale. And I personally chose school lunch as my main focus for my own community outreach and advocacy. So this is just a quick overview of some of the findings that we have about the risk and the need for work in this area. So we've worked mostly with overweight Latino children, and it's striking. A third of the kids that we work with already have prediabetes. About a third have the metabolic syndrome, which is a clustering of risk factors for type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular disease. And there's 5 risk factors. I'll go into it a little bit more, but it's things like, you know, high waist circumference, high blood pressure, low HDL cholesterol, high fasting glucose levels indicating risk for diabetes. And 90% of the children we've worked with have at least one of those risk factors. So it's a very high-risk group, and even things that you typically would only see in adults. For example, 38% of the children have non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, which puts them at risk for a whole other host of conditions as well. When those conditions are manifested early in life, the chronic complications will set in earlier, and that's why we're concerned. So a lot of these findings come from a project that's been going on for 10 or 11 years, and it's a group of high-risk children that come to the center every year, and we basically just monitor their health and try and understand a little bit more about the progression toward diabetes. You know, what are some of their dietary habits? What are some of the trends that we're seeing? And all these children are overweight, and they all have a family history of diabetes. So before I get into some of the data, I'd just like to show you a quick snapshot of the problem and from the dietary perspective. So this is the sample diet of one of the 11-year-old girls from the program. You'll see at breakfast she had Lucky Charms with milk and Tempe goat juice, which is similar to Sunny Delight. At lunch she had pizza, french fries, and a Gatorade. Then after school for a snack she had a bag of hot Cheetos and a Coke. And for dinner, flour tortilla, carne asada, Spanish rice, and agua de Jamaica, which is like a sweetened herbal tea, hibiscus drink. And what we see here at the top is a summary of her diet as it is. She had 3,100 calories, and 46% of those calories come from carbohydrate, which in the nutrition world, that's about the adequate, you know, percentage for carbohydrate intake, but the real problem is the quality of that carbohydrate intake. And what you see here is that it's 220 grams of sugar. So mostly all of, you know, good percentage of the carbohydrate that she's eating is coming from sugar. And here's what, you know, a goal range would be. Not that I like to take the perspective of telling people what to eat based on numbers. I prefer to talk about quality and, you know, choosing as many vegetables as you can, going to things like farmers markets. But it is, I think, sometimes helpful just to see the numbers to realize, you know, exactly how far off are we from what might be considered a healthy diet, and to try and pinpoint what are some of the specific areas within, you know, how the kids are eating that we might be able to change. And so you'll see here that a goal would be to have less than 50 grams of added sugar. So the sugar intake is just off the charts, and there's really no fruits or vegetables here, which means that we have very little fiber, and the combination of, you know, high sugar, low fiber diet is one of the risk factors for type 2 diabetes. In the subsequent slides, I'll show you more about the research that I did to link those two. Go ahead, Kat. So these graphs are a little bit complex. I'm going to make it, you know, as simple as I can, and I won't spend too much time. But I just wanted to show you that there is we did see a direct link between this high sugar intake and risk factors for diabetes. So the risk factor that we were evaluating here is called the disposition index, which is related to your pancreatic beta cell function, and your pancreas produces insulin. So when you have low beta cell function, it's a risk factor for type 2 diabetes. So what we saw here was, I don't have a pointer, but the more sugar intake, the kids that had the highest sugar intake also had the lowest beta cell function, indicating that their pancreas was not producing enough insulin to compensate for this high sugar. And we also saw that the relationship was maintained when we looked at the sugar just coming from beverages. Because as you know, soft drinks and chocolate milk at school and, you know, fruit punch and all these drinks, it's an easy way to take in a lot of sugar in one setting. And oftentimes we don't realize how much sugar is in that drink. It's so easy to, you know, polish off a 20-ounce Coke or whatever it is. So we also identified beverages as a big risk factor. Next slide. And this high sugar intake was also related to the weight of the children, so their total fat mass. And then inversely related to their insulin sensitivity. So if you're not insulin sensitive, you're also at higher risk for diabetes. So the more sugar they ate, the lower their insulin sensitivity. Keep going. And I looked also at risk factors for the metabolic syndrome. And I should point out that we looked at a variety of different factors within the diet. We weren't just exploring the sugar intake and the fiber intake, but these results emerged from a whole panel of analyses that looked at other things like their fat intake or protein intake, for example. And what I found here is that numbers of the features of metabolic syndrome, if you have 3 or more features, it means you have the metabolic syndrome. And it's just a way for doctors to understand, if somebody comes into the office and they're overweight, how can you classify how at risk they are for diabetes or for heart disease? And it's an easy way to kind of gauge a person's risk for chronic disease. So these participants have the metabolic syndrome, and these participants do not have the metabolic syndrome. And I found that there's a small but significant difference in their soluble fiber intake. And actually the difference was only 1 gram. So the kids with the metabolic syndrome are eating 4 grams of soluble fiber, and the kids without are eating 5 grams. And you might think, well, what is the difference? 1 gram, what does that really mean? And it's interesting, it's the equivalent in 1 apple. And so it's almost like this message of like an apple a day. But, not just an apple, it's 1/4 of a cup of beans, 1/3 of a cup of cooked oatmeal. So this finding was interesting to me, thinking that, if we can just increase, by a small amount, giving kids oatmeal at breakfast as opposed to the Frosted Flakes they're getting, in the schools, or, adding an extra apple a day, we might actually see some tangible results. Next slide. So we took these findings and we developed nutrition programs. And these are small nutrition programs that are tested at the university, and then assuming that we find good results, we're hoping that we can use that same curriculum that we developed to pass out to community members and have these lessons taught kind of in a broader setting. So we developed a 16-week study. Kat and I were very involved in working on it together. And we basically we tested a nutrition program, that same nutrition program with an exercise component as compared to a group of students that didn't receive any intervention. And we thought that we'd see the biggest benefit in this combined group that got the nutrition and strength as compared to some benefits we thought in nutrition, and then control, we didn't think we'd see any changes. So the next slide shows a little bit more about the methods. We had 60 overweight Latino children participate. They were all in high school. And we did a whole host of very comprehensive measures, including MRI and comprehensive screening for type 2 diabetes. And what we saw was not what we expected. And so this graph just shows one of our findings that we didn't think that we would see, we thought that we would see much bigger changes than we saw, put it that way. So here we have the changes in glucose response, and we thought that we would see the biggest changes, the biggest decreases in the combination group, the kids that got nutrition and strength. What we actually saw was the biggest decrease in the nutrition-only group, and the control group, this could be expected, actually had a worsening of their glucose response. So Kat, if you could do the next slide. But what was really fascinating was that we saw a lot of individual variation in change. So these graphs show the individual response based on which group they were in. And the light blue group is the control, the orange is the nutrition, and the combination is the purple. And each one of these bars represents one individual. So here on your left, these are all of the children that reduced their sugar intake over the course of the 16 weeks. And you see that the control kids were almost equally as likely to reduce their sugar intake as the kids in the intervention group. And we didn't know why, and we figured out that it was probably because when we recruited them to the program, we told them, we're going to, help you change your diet. We're going to tell you all about how you can take out the soft drinks. We're going to help you eat more fiber and eat more fruits and vegetables, eat more beans and higher, grain things. So they knew about it. And half the kids, regardless of what their group they were in, made the changes that we wanted. These are the kids that reduced their sugar. These are the kids that increased their fiber intake. So Kat, if you could do the next slide. What I did subsequently was I analyzed my results based on who actually made the changes, not necessarily who was in which of the assigned groups. And what I found was that the kids that decreased their sugar, which will be shown here in green if you could advance it once more, had a very significant decrease in their insulin response, which is, in this case, is a positive. And the kids that increased their sugar had more or less no change. So it's interesting to see that if the kids actually made the change, they would have the results that we were hoping for. And the next slide will show similar results with fiber intake. The kids that increased their fiber, shown here in green, had a significant decrease in visceral fat, which was measured by MRI, and it's the fat in the middle of your body surrounding your organs, and that's the fat that's the most harmful for you metabolically. So, and Kat actually had a great paper too, where she showed that the kids that skip breakfast are more at risk for visceral fat as well. So we're kind of identifying that it's not just how much you weigh, but it's where that weight is and where it's distributed, and certain aspects of the diet tend to contribute more to weight in those areas. Okay, so we can move on. And this is where we get to the part of the presentation that I'm even more excited about talking about, is once we did those really controlled studies, in the lab, where the kids went to the hospital and had these, comprehensive tests, we were able to take the similar message and teach it in the community. And we didn't have funding for this, but we put it all together. We had funding from Slow Food and from the Farmers Market in Highland Park. And we taught an intervention in a community garden. And so it was even more fun to teach there because our cooking component could be outdoors using some of the vegetables that were harvested right from the garden. And we did a 12-week program after school for 4th and 5th graders. It's called Ellie Sprouts. We developed a curriculum. The kids came once a week for gardening and nutrition, and they also did farmers market visits 4 times over the 12 weeks. And we did some pre and post measures at their school. So not as comprehensive, but we measured their weight and their blood pressure and things like this. And so next slide, please, Kat. These are some pictures of the kids participating at the farmers market and at the garden. And the reason we wanted to do this is because as much as within the community that I think we all are a part of, we all believe in community gardens. We all believe in this type of nutrition education. But I have to tell you that I don't think the medical community believes in it yet, because they haven't seen the results. They know, a lot of the studies show, okay, if you come to a community garden, yes, maybe your preference for fruits and vegetables might increase, or maybe you will start eating them more, but nobody has actually measured, does that actually improve your weight? Does that actually improve, some other indicators of health? So we sought to do that. And the next slide will show some of our results. For the moment, just ignore these ones that are hatched and focus only on the solid bars. We saw that the kids here in blue, the LA Sprouts participants, had an increase in their fiber intake over the course of the intervention through increased fruits and vegetables and beans and whole grains, as compared to the kids that didn't receive the intervention. And then these results were a little bit stronger if you looked only at the kids that were overweight, and a lot of the kids that participated in the program were overweight. So the results were more effective in the overweight subgroup. And the kids in the intervention, all the kids gained weight over the 12 weeks, but the kids in the intervention group gained less weight. So it seemed like we were able to kind of attenuate some of the risk for obesity. If you go to the next slide, I'll just summarize. We also saw some significant changes in blood pressure between the groups. The overweight kids had a reduction in their body mass index. And we also saw some other interesting behavioral findings, like increased intake of vegetables, increased preference for fruits and vegetables in general, and also self-efficacy. So the kids reporting that they feel more confident in being able to cook and garden, which we think is really important, because I think the kitchen can be intimidating for kids that don't grow up around parents who cook. If you move to the next slide, Kat. Just to summarize this part of the presentation, so what I found in my research is that sugar intake seems to be one of the main risk factors within the diets of the overweight children in Los Angeles that we work with. And also low fiber consumption is a risk factor. And if you target these two goals within the context of a nutrition intervention, you can see positive results in terms of reduction in risk for obesity and diabetes. And possible way to do this is through a gardening and cooking intervention where, not necessarily talking to the kids, okay, sugar versus fiber, but talking about, let's take out some of the soft drinks, let's drink more water, you can put cucumber in the water, lemon in the water to make it taste better, let's pull some mint from the garden, let's try some of these vegetables, more beans, that kind of thing. So we move on to the next slide. I'd like to talk about how I'm trying to work to take some of these results and disseminate them even further. So yes, we've published the results from these findings, but I feel like sometimes those results aren't shown to the community. Maybe researchers find them when they're doing literature searches, or grad students find them when we're doing our papers, but how does the average community person benefit from these programs? And so I've been working on the topic of school lunch, because I've found that it's not that the school food is, clearly not the sole contributor to these problems, but when you do look at what the kids are given on a given day, it's actually very high in sugar and it's very low in fiber. So it's exactly the type of problem that we're seeing in our research. And yes, it's true probably what they get from the corner store after school could be worse than what they're getting in school, but the fact is that in Los Angeles, 80% of the kids in the LAUSD qualify for free and reduced meals. Mm-hmm. So, today we're talking about food justice. I really do feel like it's a justice issue. The government's going to be providing kids with food. And a lot of kids are eating at least half of their daily calories at school. It's really unfair to be giving them something that's just going to basically give them chronic diseases. And I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but just want you to know how severe the statistics are. Right now, 1 in 2 Latino children born in the year 2000 is projected to develop type 2 diabetes. Wow. 1 in 3 children if you look at children of all ethnicities. So, it's severe. And there has been some research showing directly that participation in school lunch programs is a risk factor for obesity. And so we definitely have a group, participating in the school lunch that's at risk. So I'd like to just mention some of the work that I've done in the arena of school lunch, and then I'd like to hear what you possibly are doing through your organizations as well. We had a slow food campaign in 2009 that was the Time for Lunch campaign. Was anybody involved in that here in San Diego? Okay, so basically what it was we were trying to lobby for the reenactment of the Child Nutrition Act, and we had these series of events across Los Angeles called eat-ins, like a combination between a potluck and a protest, and we got as many people as possible to write letters to the senators and to Congress to reauthorize the program, and we were actually hoping for more funding. We didn't get it. We got a little bit of an increase, but not as much as we wanted. But it was a start, and we brought the community together around the cause. And here we are in Highland Park at one of the biggest eat-ins that we organized in LA. We did 6 that day. It was on
I was a part of
Labor
that.
Day. Were you? Okay.
Yeah, I think I met you too. Was it in Pasadena?
Really? Yeah. Well, Highland Park.
Highland Park.
Did you come to that?
I was there.
Ah, great.
I had my food there too.
Wonderful. So you heard the music and the letters. Very
There's
good.
an actress that came. She spoke. Can't think of her name, but I was there. It was cool.
Great. I'm glad. All right. So that's the first thing that we did. And if you'll go to the next slide, Kat. So that was 2009. Then I spent 2010 in Italy doing a fellowship, and it was nice to get just a different perspective and see what's served in Italy, for example, in school lunch. So here's what's served in Los Angeles. For now, just ignore the menu writing here because it doesn't correspond with the pictures. Just want to show you the pictures. Here's a typical school lunch in LA. Sweet and sour chicken with potato wedges on the side, served with strawberry milk and a chocolate dairy dessert. Then here's what's served in Bologna on a typical day. I'm not saying this is the ideal, but there's some things about it that I like, more than I like in Los Angeles. It's lasagna with pesto, some chicken, a roll, green beans, and a piece of cheese. And a piece of fruit is standard, but it's not served at the beginning of the meal. And the drink is always water. So I appreciate that the kids are given water in Italy, appreciate that they're always given a fruit and vegetable, and that the food more resembles a home-cooked food versus like airline food is the way I'm starting to see it in LA. And also that kid food here is marketed as kid food. They feel like they have to make everything cute. Like they can't just call it cucumber slices or cucumber, they have to call it cucumber coins, or they have to make some sort of potato smile name for the wedges or whatever. And you know, that's something that I never saw abroad. So I came back and I was fired up and I wanted to see if I could do something. And I started attending, go to the next slide, Kat. I started attending these public meetings that the LAUSD has, or was having. They just canceled them, I think because more people started to get involved. We started to rock the boat, which I think is a good sign. But I got even more mad, so I saw that the breakfast is coffee cake with cereal, with juice and a choice of milk. And that means that the kids are actually taking their Frosted Flakes and pouring chocolate milk on it for breakfast. And so the next slide gives an example of exactly why that's so bad. So we all know that 1 can of sugar, or 1 can of soda has 39 grams of sugar, which is about 10 teaspoons. If you add up that breakfast, it's 79 grams of sugar, 51 of which are from added sugar. So because the juice has some naturally occurring sugars, I don't think it's quite fair to count that, but I do want to mention 79 grams. It's insane. It's really just upsetting. So we wrote an op-ed, it was in the LA Times on March 2nd, to try and raise some awareness for this issue. Keep going, Kat. Just again pointing out that this is way over the World Health Organization standards. But there's a loophole. So the USDA standards don't say anything about a specific quantity for added sugar. So they basically say something like, added sugars may be used in discretion, but they should be limited. So it's very nebulous, right? And meanwhile, they're very strict about taking out sodium, and they're very strict now about taking out fat. But they're basically loading the food with sugar still. And when I started to dive more into the issue, I realized that what they're doing is they're luring kids into the cafeteria with sweet foods. And specifically the milk issue is very political. Kat, if you could go to the next slide, I think I talk about it. Well, first of all, just pointing out that it's a huge district, it's the second largest district in the nation. There's limited budgets. The food budget per meal is 77 cents. Limited cafeteria facilities. There are 58 schools that don't have hand washing facilities in the cafeteria. So it's not a cafeteria. It's been called a reheating closet. It's just terrible. I mean, it's like a plane. It's like an airplane. It's like the district is an airline and each school is an airplane. Is the way that I see it. And I mean, anyway, and then there's all these politics involved. So, next slide, Kat. The milk. The milk is the most political. And basically, the government receives funding if the kids participate in the meal. And the kids are allowed to refuse 1 item at breakfast, and they're allowed to refuse 2 items at lunch, and the district will still be reimbursed. But the fact is that the chocolate milk and the strawberry milk, which is offered at breakfast and lunch in LA, is one of the most popular things. So the district fears that if they take that out, the kids won't participate. And part of me doesn't blame the kids. If I was given that horrible sweet and sour meal with those terrible potato wedges, I would probably feel like the chocolate milk was the safest thing and maybe just have that. So, I can understand. But at the same time, when I added it up, if the kids choose that chocolate milk at breakfast and lunch, it's a gallon of sugar over the 170 educational days. I mean, it's just, and there's pretty much no room to include that much sugar in the milk and still meet the standards. So I do feel like the chocolate milk needs to go, or it needs to be, a once a week kind of treat. Next slide, please, Kat. So I just wanted to mention the USDA has proposed new standards. They're available for public comment for a couple more days, and so there's an opportunity to write and say, please include a new standard to limit added sugar. Not just a standard saying, please limit it, but a standard saying how much. And I would like to see them say that collectively, over, in one meal, we can only have, I like the World Health Organization standard, which is 10% of calories or less. So I'd encourage you to write, and Slow Food actually has been sending out announcements about, how to make a comment, and I'll give you the link here as well if you'd like. Doesn't have to be a big formal letter. You can even just send them 2 sentences, just saying, please, like, take the sugar out of the food. So next slide, please, Kat. So the way that I see it is that we're not going to change the airline food overnight. But the first thing we can do is take the sugar out of it, you know, change the cereal options to make them more whole grain cereals, small things. And then meanwhile, I think we need to be working on the ground with our own communities to promote the gardens, to promote scratch cooking, things that take a little more infrastructure and a little more time, but we can be working on them simultaneously. Next slide, please. Certainly you can work with, you know, children and parents at a, you know, on a smaller scale, asking parents to help, you know, teach their children about, you know, what's in the food, ask them to go eat lunch with their children at school, because a lot of parents don't know what's being served. And frankly, I think a lot of parents don't realize that there might be an option to change it, because perhaps it's like, you know, you think, oh, it's free lunch, so I should just take what they give. Whereas I feel like if we all collectively say, this is not cool, you know, we need to change this, then there might be a little bit more power and options for change. Next slide, please. Here's how to comment on the USDA proposal. The website's here, and I'm happy to, if you leave me with your email address, I'm happy to send you my presentation and some additional information as well. Next slide, please. What I'm working on right now, and this is also in conjunction with my work with the Jamie Oliver Foundation, is we're trying to get as many kids as possible to write letters to the LAUSD. And kids could certainly write to the USDA as well. So I developed a template. It's like a lesson plan. And I feel like if you are having similar problems here in San Diego with the food, I'd be happy to share that lesson plan with you. And you could easily modify it to have the letters directed to the superintendent here in San Diego and to the other leaders of the district and the community in general. So also we put up an online template where I guess parents, it would not really be for the kids, but parents could do an auto email to the superintendent. Okay, next slide, please. I just wanted to quickly share the power of a student letter. So this is one of my favorite letters that we got during the Slow Food Time for Lunch campaign, and I'll read it because it's a little bit hard to understand, or to see. So Senator Boxer, I think this bill, he's talking about the Child Nutrition Act, should become law so that kids in the United States have better lunches. Think that we are in U.S. history when Columbus was sailing to America. Their food is so nasty that they had to eat it at night, so they could not see what they eat. I imagine that I am eating in the dark at night when I eat my lunch at school. An example of a school lunch is lasagna. It looks and tastes disgusting. Juan Morales. So for me, I mean, that's something that I could never imagine writing. I mean, but it's so, you know, I didn't know whether to smile or cry when I read that. I felt like I was just a way of expressing the perspective that was so powerful yet so sad at the same time. So we've had a lot of luck with, you know, getting the students to voice their opinion, and they love doing it. They love, because often they get a reply, which is really fun, and they like going, you know, having their own stamp, having their own envelope, going to the mailbox and sending it. So it's almost done with my presentation. Just wanted to point out that it's good to just see the changes happening school by school, to not be discouraged about what's happening with the larger district. Here's some examples of model programs happening in LA and beyond. Keep going. And then advocacy groups. So we formed a group called Food for Lunch in Los Angeles. That's a group of concerned individuals, parents, leaders of different organizations. Slow Food definitely is lobbying for these same causes. California Food Policy Advocates is a great resource to explain all of these policies and potential policy changes. And then also the Jamie Oliver Food Revolution. The show is starting next Tuesday, and I think it'll help raise a lot of awareness for the issue, and there's a whole advocacy campaign going along with it. So if you're interested in that, you can sign up online, sign the petition, and then you'll start to receive announcements and things like, here's a quick way to submit an auto-generated email to the USDA is one example that the Oliver Foundation that we're working on. And also Facebook groups through the Food Revolution. If anybody would like to start one here in San Diego, it's very easy to do, and another way to kind of bring people together around the cause. I think that's about it. Let's see what, I think my next slide is just my thank you slide. Just like to thank some of the faculty that I work with at USC. And also I wanted just to point out that these are all of our sponsors for our LA Sprouts Garden Intervention. It took a lot of groups to come together to make it happen, but it was really neat to see that a lot of people were willing, even if they could just, like the farmers market gave us $1 vouchers, one $1 voucher for each student each time they went to the market. But what was so great to see is that, yes, it's only $1, but they could go home with one great vegetable. Or a lot of times the farmers would see the kid and think like, oh, you just have $1 voucher, let me give you a little bit more. And so everybody kind of came together. So that's the end of my presentation. Thank you for listening. Yeah, okay, excellent. So can I take any questions?
I had a question. Well, I teach here in San Diego, and I'm disgusted by what they eat every day.
Yeah.
Kids
Yeah.
have panic attacks after they eat in my class because they cook in my class, and they go and eat the lunch, and they come back, and then they're just like, they think we're dogs and animals. Look at this food, and they chuck most of it. So
Wow.
I was wondering, have you actually gone to the school board there in LA, or and talked to them, and what are their reactions? Because
Well, it's difficult to get directly in with the school board, but on April 19th, we hope to go with all the student letters and hopefully, meet with the board in person. But I have met on a bi-weekly basis with the food service directors, and that's where I started to get very frustrated. And they were very open at first to having us there, but the more we started to rock the boat, because they said, well, there were a lot of excuses, like, parents don't really want the change because parents want their kids to drink milk, so if you take away the chocolate milk, the kids won't drink the milk. And we said, well, we'll show you the parents on the other side, and when we did, that's when they started canceling the meetings. So there's definitely a lack of transparency, I think.
I also know, sorry, I'm like so passionate about this, I can't, but I know the food service director here because he's come to our culinary advisory groups, and but the thing is they have a contract with Cisco, so it's all about business. They're very business minded. It's not really about the kids and the nutrition. Really, that's the bottom. They want to show that they care, but it's all about these contracts that they have to fulfill. It's a business for them, and that's how they look at it. So.
What's interesting is that I'm on that. I try to be on both sides because I have a business, and my food is healthy. It's really healthy and it's delicious. But then there's a cost associated with having that because we don't put junk in our food. We use natural products. And so the problem is with these schools is they don't have the budget. They really don't have the budget because here I am. I want to be a vendor for them, but I won't make any money. I'll lose money with the budget that they have to buy the food. So that's the real root of it. Is they need to allocate. They need to increase the budget and then start choosing vendors that have better products. That's really the root of it because I think each school gets so much money from the government for students just showing up to school, and so that's really the argument is increasing the budget so that suppliers would be able to make a little bit of a profit. Like if I sold my product to the schools, it would have to be so much volume that I would have to go to my vendors and negotiate high volume pricing to be able to meet that mark. And so it's a lot of variables that are in play, but primarily it's the cost. And Cisco, for example, they have a markup, and then that's what their biggest issue is because they have shareholders, and they want to produce a profit for their shareholders. So they get the junk. Give us what you can give us to supply our kids. I mean, that's That's
Yes, that's true.
sad.
Did you have another comment?
Yeah, no, I totally agree with what the gentleman just said. I mean, I was gonna say like I don't know how much time we have, but it's almost like maybe we could have a discussion instead of just questions because
Definitely.
we're all passionate about
Yes.
this, and it makes me angry. Like it's so hypocritical to preach to kids about healthy food and choosing well. Blah. They don't have a choice. They're not given a choice. They're given a choice between greasy pizza and a cheeseburger with no vegetables in it, no tomato, no lettuce. I mean, it's disgusting.
Yes.
There's like almost no nutritional value. I mean, I work with teenagers in a different capacity at a shelter here in San Diego, but I enroll them in school, and the stuff that they're, I mean, I don't even want to say offered because it makes it sound like there's a choice, but it's basically white bread, which we know is terrible, and probably very high fatty, like disgusting beef from like the worst, beef farms,
Yeah.
and then disgusting cheese that's like,
Yeah.
fluorescent yellow, and then and fries and chocolate milk, like you said, and
Yeah.
there's just like nothing good about it. And I take my kids, I'm a case manager for these kids, so I take them to the doctor. And like you said, like when you said one kids born after 2000, about half of them will be diabetic in California, I guess. And it's right.
Nationwide.
I mean,
Nationwide.
nationwide.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was a CDC study. So,
That's. I mean, it is a crime on the part of our government that we're allowing that
Yeah.
to happen.
I agree.
And it's just like he said, like that. It's not a priority. We have $700 billion to bail out the banks in a financial crisis. We have $400 million to drop bombs on Libya the first day of our totally unnecessary intervention in the first place.
Right.
But we don't have money to pay for healthy food like his mom's sweet potato pies.
Yeah.
So like it's just like what I was gonna ask actually the woman who was speaking over here is like, is there any potential for teachers unions to get involved, because I feel like that's where the power is at the sort of the root, which is like we're the people running the school, you know what I mean? Like I know because I used to be a TA, and teachers do have power when they choose to walk out. I mean, they went on strike for 4 days in '96 and they got exactly what they were asking for in their contract.
Yeah.
And I almost feel like the demand for healthy food for their students, which probably will make them function better in class, needs to be part of the demand for a fair contract when they're renewing contracts for work.
Right.
Because I don't see any other way for it to change. Parents can't get involved. Parents are struggling right now. Parents are working 2 jobs. They're single parents. They do not. I mean, most parents don't have the luxury. I'm almost done.
Yeah.
Most parents don't have the luxury to come drop in on their kid at lunch and be like, "Oh, let me see what you're eating."
So true.
They don't have that time.
Yeah.
You have a
That's
question?
a really good point. Yeah.
Well, less of a question, more of a comment. One of the things that I think of just basically as a blunt taxpayer is
Yeah.
how much I'm being charged
Oh, yes.
for that dreadful
Yeah.
meal that we just
Yeah.
saw. Because when people talk about we don't have the money or it's too expensive to do X, the obvious follow-up question is, so what are you paying for the crap?
Why am I buying junk for our nation?
And when you
It's
price it
crazy.
out in the middle,
Already
the
making
retail
money.
consumer market,
Yeah.
the schools are oftentimes paying more than what you would pay for retail consumer if you went to
Right.
Albertsons and bought that
Right.
crappy
Right.
meal. And the second thing is there a disparity, because this is sort of where I live, is there a disparity between, say, richer, not necessarily richer schools within the same school district, but richer districts?
Yes.
In terms of, you were talking about the LA Unified School District, 80% free and reduced price lunches. That's one reason is because, and we're going to talk about kind of racism later, one reason is because of white flight that left those things, and so now you either have private school systems that are doing that, or public school systems that are being able to do a better job for it, because LA County is not 80% free and reduced price lunch.
Yes.
So you have to look at these other ancillary
Yes.
school districts. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yes. Very good point.
I just got back from a conference in San Jose and heard David Kessler, and he does say that the government needs to start getting involved with the leasing.
Yeah.
Because it's
Good.
just so high, and and how
Right.
it got involved with smoking, and now they're going to lease on it.
I wanted to ask, are there studies, you did the study, see how much sugar, and because first it was focused on fat, so it was like, oh, it's not fried, it's baked, or whatever,
Yeah.
but now, if there were more studies on just behavior, as a teacher we struggle, I'm a high school teacher, and it's ridiculous, they're not eating for their brain function, it's like, no one talks about brain food. When I say this in my class, they're like, what do you mean brain food, and I said growing up that's what we were given, eat your almonds in the morning or fish, but like no one talks to them about brain food.
Right.
If you want a smarter nation, you should be feeding kids food for,
Can I ask you a question?
Sorry,
When
I think
you After they get back.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, I think it's great. I just wanted to check in with Kat. Her film is about 8 minutes or so. And so we have, what we might want to do is, because Kat kind of brings up a related but similar perspective about, food deserts in South LA. So it might be. Oh, really? Okay. Because I think what we could do, assuming we have audio, is show her 8-minute film, and then we can have, I think, an even richer discussion. It's not working. Will you talk about your film?
Yeah, I can do that. Well, I think this is a great discussion,
Yeah.
and you guys can. I have it on YouTube. Oh, I don't know.
YouTube.
I have it on. It's on YouTube. You guys can watch it later. I think this is a really neat time to have us continue talking, and I don't know what else.
Yeah, sounds good.
It doesn't sound like it's working.
I can also just, I think we can link in your topic really well, Kat, because what Kat did was she got to know one of our participants from one of our research studies, the nutrition intervention study, Monet, and Kat followed Monet in Monet's neighborhood to see, on the one hand, Monet is learning about all these great ways of eating, but then she returns to her neighborhood, and how can she replicate that?
Yeah, so no idea. I think, so we're talking about choice and the food environment, and this is basically her neighborhood. It's in South LA. If you map the grocery stores in her neighborhood, there's very few, and she talks about within from where she lives, there's just a plethora of fast food and junk, and her grandmother had diabetes, her mom had diabetes, and the choices that she faced. And she's now 18, but through school, with the crappy school lunch, and then after school, everything that's available, I just think it's talking about the social justice piece. It's promoting the choice and making changes in the environment. If we do focus on teaching, and there aren't the options like everyone else in here said, it's futile. I can't say it as well as she can say it.
It's great you have it on YouTube, though. It's easy to.
Yeah, and if you go on YouTube and you look up South LA fast food, the name of the film is Deserted. 7 minutes, and you can hear what she talks about. But I would really like to continue on the discussion. I guess you guys could just watch it in the background. This is the piece here. This is in front of her house, and there's right across the street. She's got a liquor store, a donut shop. There's many fast food restaurants around where she lives, and if you Google gyms in the area, it's there's no gyms in South LA, maybe one, but in the certain area that she is. So we see concentrated poor food choices in these areas, these low-income areas, and I'm not sure how we change it. Let me just tell you a little bit about my background. I was on the track of Emily of PhD. I moved down to San Diego to do my first year in a PhD in public health, and I made this film. I'm interested in the advocacy piece, and I couldn't. The program I felt was crushing my creativity, and so what I wanted to say to all of you, sort of on a side note, as an activist and for me, I'm on this quest to try to figure out, what the meaning of life is, which really is an existential question. What am I doing here? What's the point of all of this? But what piece? I heard some over here sustainable building develop. Is that right? What are you passionate in? What does that change look like for me? For me, I'm not sure. Maybe I may look into doing more writing or film, but what's important is that we all can work together as a community. I love how Emily's taken the research piece and is bringing that and translating that into very tangible policy, legislative things that can be done, and encourage all of you to be thinking outside the box and collaborate. I think this is a unique opportunity. So let me turn it back over to all of you to continue where we were in the discussion and just let the film play in the background.
When was this produced?
I'm sorry?
When was this produced?
2 years ago.
Okay.
I filmed it. She was one of our students in our program, actually. She got the control group, but she learned a lot. She's she's a culinary student, and she's very passionate about food. She's an amazing young woman. So yeah, I'll write down on the board if I can find the markers, I mean, of how you can search it. So, back to, any questions? Yeah.
What is the city of LA doing about this, and do you think anything's working?
Well, I know that, I believe it was in 2008 that Jan Perry, who is she's a district assemblywoman, I can't remember exactly her role, but she helped pass a moratorium on new fast foods being built in South LA for this year period. I don't know where all of that is right now. I don't know the update on that. There was some backlash on, controlling the government and community, but it's difficult. I mean, again, like what we were just talking in the drive here, like it is about, at the end of the day, it is about the profit. It's about all of these companies reporting to shareholders, and how do we work around that? I don't really know if I have any answers. I mean, I'm excited about the direction.
I think we should let the districts eat the food that the children are eating for a month to see how they like it.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe there needs to be something. What's that?
I said I don't think that would actually change behavior for one thing.
Well, it would change the mindset of.
Not necessarily. I respectfully, I mean, since it's a discussion, I think that it would give them a little bit of awareness, and it would give them some sound bites, and they would never ever want to look at a chicken nugget again. But if at the end of that time limited piece, they could go back to doing exactly what they were doing and allow, again, I think it goes back to class and to a lesser extent race. One of the things that I was thinking of was that it's not just about food. You were talking about the fat that concentrates in the belly. That's as much of a piece when it comes to stress and the HPA system as it is anything else. And that is a big part of the environment that these people find themselves in. And that actually is true when people in certain marginalized groups, such as black and brown people, leave low-income areas and go into more middle-class areas. The stress component of being a marginalized person in the society still gives them the propensity for belly fat. I mean, the point is that at one end, unless we're really willing not just to look at the food piece, but to larger systemic problems in society, we're still, and I'm giving away everything I'm going to say at 1:30.
Teaser.
Well, I think the key is education.
I think that
because I grew up in Mississippi. I mean, it's third world country down there. But growing up, my mom fed us 6 boys. She fed us properly. I mean, we didn't eat processed food. She made choices for us. So I think it's educating parents, it's educating the kids, maybe at the school level, putting this in the curriculum. How do we demonstrate and show these kids this is a better food for you, a better choice for you when you leave school.
One of the things that I was going to say, and I don't want this to turn into the Lace and I don't know your name.
Keith.
The Lace and Keith show. But I think that kind of part of the problem with that is that, and that's one of the things I'm going to talk about at 1:30, is that we do come from an agricultural background, and that is that African Americans didn't come out of the Middle Passage eating enchiladas.
Exactly.
Sorry, I don't want to interrupt you, but I just feel like I have to say this too. Like we can't just generalize what everyone eats. We have to recognize the different cultures, and when we do that in my class too, I just see this like their eyes get really wide. So I do this thing where we have traditional food for African American, and now what's happened to it. Traditional food for Latin Americans, and what happened to it. For Vietnamese, and then what happened to it now. Like the traditional versus the new foods in America, and how it's changed in the diet, and that makes them so kids kind of they feel like they can recognize and say, oh yeah, that's the kind of food, because they might not have cornflakes for breakfast. They might have a rice porridge, or you know, or they might not have, I don't know, at home they probably never eat, you know, chicken nuggets, but some do. So if we recognize what everyone, culturally, there should be more options too, and have them kind of relate to those foods maybe, and then that way we would have better eating patterns. I don't know, that's just one idea.